In this video, we're going to do some guided exam question practice on the 2019 question on the respiratory system. So it came up, it was question 9 on this 2019 exam paper, and it was a 15-mark question. So you got about 5 minutes to do this. Okay, so we're going to walk you through this. The first bit is pretty straightforward. The second bit, I'm hoping most of you will be able to do it, but I'm going to give you a bit of support to help you along the way. Let's get cracking, set your timer for 5 minutes, and we'll get started. Okay, so as you see, 15 marks means 5 minutes, so set your timer. We're given a diagram. It says the diagram shows the human respiratory system. So they're telling you what the diagram shows. So respiratory, you're thinking straight away, hopefully, respiration, oxygen. We're talking about the lungs and the way we get air and oxygen from the air into our lungs and carbon dioxide from our bodies out of the lungs. That's what we're talking about in respiration. So we've got this unlabeled diagram with the letters A, B, and C. And let's look for the action word, complete. So complete the table below by matching the words to the letters on the diagram. I love questions like this because really you've given a serious amount of support and help by having the options for the words. Yes, there are too many options. There are 5 options, and you just have to choose the 3 that are correct. Now, straight away, I think that A and C should be super, super, super easy for absolutely everybody. I don't think there's any student in the country doing junior cert who can't do A and C, even if you've never studied science. B is a little bit more difficult because there are 2 options which students may mix up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an opportunity here to pause the video, go ahead, copy down this table, A, B, and C, a rough table, and do at least A and C, have a go at B, write them down, pause the video, do that now. Okay, so hopefully you didn't have too much problems with A from these options. Okay, A is hopefully you're realizing the only option that really fits here is mouth. So you've written in, hopefully for A, you've written in mouth. Okay. For C, definitely tackle C next. Okay, so we can definitely cross off mouth now. Well, now we've only got 4 options left. Okay, and again, all of us, hopefully, you will be familiar that this, out of those ones that are left, it's the lung. Okay, so A and C are covered. Okay, done. Sorry. All right, so now we've got 3 options left, and really 2 of them are similar. The liver, most of us would be familiar that the liver is not a kind of a tube. And our issue is that both the trachea and the esophagus are both tubes in the body, and they're both tubes that are connected to the mouth. The issue is that one carries food to the stomach and one carries air to the lungs. So again, pause the video if you know which one is which here. All right, so esophagus, again, we would have learned in the digestive system that the esophagus is a tube that's got a muscle lining in the walls, which helps to kind of squeeze the food down into the stomach. It massages the food down. So that belongs to a totally different system. It's not shown here in the diagram. Actually, it is, I lie. Just there, it is, the top of it is shown, but the rest of it is hidden. So this would be the esophagus, and which leaves the tube that we're left with to carry air to the lungs. The actual one here is B. And we could recognize that, hopefully, if you ever see this again, I did tell you about this when we did it, but see these white rings around the trachea? These are what we call rings of cartilage. And what these do is they help to keep this windpipe open. It's really important that this tube stays open. So these little kind of more solidy rings, they're like tough cartilage, kind of like what's in your nose. If you feel your nose, it's not bone, but it's not just skin either. Okay, so the tip of your nose, that's what we call cartilage. It's a type of tissue, and it's designed in this case to keep the tube open so air can easily flow up and down. Okay, so B is the trachea. Okay, so well done if you got that right by yourself. Let's move on to the next bit. The next bit is definitely harder. This was worth 6 marks, by the way. So they were 2 each. So easy 6 marks. The next one, though, is worth 9 marks. Okay, so 9 marks. Now, you're not told it's worth 9 marks. That's a bit of a problem here. Okay, you're not told it's worth 9. But if you were, even if you were to guess here, this is 3 by 3. So we basically need 3 solid points in this question. So we're looking for 3 scoring points, if you like. Right, let's have a look at what it says. Describe. So we have to use like descriptive language to say what happens in the respiratory system when a person breathes in. So when a person breathes in, this is called inhalation. We inhale, inhalation. Okay, so most of us might be able to have a crack at this. Think about some of the things that happen inside the body, especially look at this system. Use the diagram for your help, guys. I can't tell you that enough. If you're stuck for what to write, go back up to the diagram and think about, okay, visualize breathing in. I want you to close your eyes and take a deep breath and think about what's actually happening there, okay? Obviously, air is moving, so you've got to be a bit more specific. Where is it moving? Where does it go in? Where does it go then? Where does it go then? What else has to happen to make you breathe in, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an opportunity to just pause the video and see what you can write down by yourself. Can you get 3 key points, at least 3? I would suggest 4 or 5 just in case. All right, so pause the video and do that now. Okay, so if you were struggling with this and you couldn't get started, I'm going to give you a couple of sentence starters to help you think about what happens. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is this gigantic muscle down here. Okay, and we talked about this in class. This muscle is called the diaphragm. Now, you weren't asked to name this here, but this muscle is called the diaphragm. It's a giant, like, sheet muscle. So what I want you to think about is, well, what has to happen to it to make air go into the lungs? Now, again, we described this process in class, but what has to happen to the diaphragm? So I'm going to make a sentence starter for you. I'm going to say the diaphragm, dot, dot, dot. So again, pause the video to see if you can finish off that sentence. The diaphragm, what does it do? So look at the diagram again. If you're stuck, what would have to happen to the diaphragm? Okay, so hopefully you wrote a sentence there. If you didn't, I'm going to give you some more opportunities to write sentences. I'm going to give you lots, and you have to get 3 of these right. Okay, so what happens to the rib cage? Now, the rib cage wasn't shown in this diagram. The rib cage, dot, dot, dot. What happens to it? Again, we would have talked about this in class, so I would have asked you to put your hands on your rib cage and feel it as you breathe in. If you can't remember, do that again. Now, put your hands on the rib cage. Take a deep breath in and describe what happens to it, okay? So pause the video, do that now. Okay, so the next thing to talk about was what happens in terms of to get the air to move in. What happens to the pressure inside the lungs? Pressure in the lungs, dot, dot, dot. Finish it off, pause the video now. Okay, on to the next one. What happens to the actual lobes of the lungs? So up here, when air goes into the lung here, what's going to happen to each of the lungs? So again, here's another sentence that might score us a point. The lungs, dot, dot, dot. Pause the video. Okay, what would we say about air? What happens to air then? As the lung does whatever you said it does before, what happens to air? Okay, so the next one is, well, we know hopefully in the last sentence you wrote something about air is taken into the body, or air goes into the body, or into the mouth, or into the nose. You said something like that. Where does it go now? How does it get to the lungs? Air travels, dot, dot, dot. How does it get to the lungs? Pause the video, write it down. Okay, once in the lungs then, we have to talk about, well, what's the whole purpose of getting air into the body? Is to do something to do with oxygen. Okay, so something to do with oxygen. So what happens to oxygen then once it's in the lungs? Oxygen, dot, dot, dot. Talk about oxygen down in the lungs. What happens? Okay, pause the video. And finally, another process here of getting of breathing is that after oxygen does what hopefully you wrote in the last sentence, carbon dioxide has to do something. It's basically moving from somewhere to somewhere. Okay, so hopefully in the previous sentence you talked about oxygen moving from somewhere to somewhere. Now the last sentence we're talking about carbon dioxide moving from somewhere to somewhere. So again, I'm going to get you to write about carbon dioxide, dot, dot, dot. Finish off the sentence, talk about how carbon dioxide moves. Okay, so hopefully you have completed these sentences and you've got way more than you actually need here, but this would be a full description. So this would obviously, it's good to be able to write a full description about what happens in the lungs, okay, when you breathe in. But you don't need all this detail for this. But again, we're teaching you how stuff actually works, not just teaching you for the exam. There's no point in that. So let's go through what you might have wrote here. At this stage, you can pause your timer because we're kind of going through the answers now. How long did that take? I'm hoping it was about 5 minutes. Okay, so what happens to the diaphragm? So to finish off this sentence and make it make sense, we might say the diaphragm, well, what it does is it lowers basically. The diaphragm has to go lower. Okay, or what we know about muscles is that they contract. Okay, so muscles contract and relax. So when it contracts, this makes it go tighten and it makes it flatten out at the bottom here. So the diaphragm stops being curved up in this shape. Okay, it stops being curved up like this, and instead it flattens out like this, and this sucks the lungs down and stuff like that, sucks air into the lungs kind of. So we could say here the diaphragm either contracts or lowers. I'm going to say contracts, but if you said lowers, then that's fine. What happens to the rib cage? I told you to feel the rib cage and talk about what happens to it. Okay, well, hopefully we'll say the rib cage, what happens to it? It rises up. So if we take a deep breath, it goes up and out. So the rib cage rises. You might say up and out. The pressure in the lungs, what happens to it? Well, it decreases. So when the muscles do their thing, so the rib cage goes up and out, it makes it bigger, and the muscle goes down, it makes it bigger. That makes the pressure in the lungs drop. And then the lungs, what do? The lungs expand. The lungs expand, means they get bigger. And as they get bigger, air gets sucked in through the nose and the mouth. So we'd say air is taken in, or air is sucked in, taken in, or air is sucked in through the mouth and the nose. Next one, air. Okay, I said to talk about where does it travel through and to. So air travels through, and again, you look back at your diagram. What do we say B was called here? So the air goes in here, guys, in here, and then it goes down through the trachea to the lungs. Okay, so this tube B here is the tube it's traveling in. We call it the trachea. So air travels through the trachea to the lungs. To the lungs. Again, well done if you got that right. And now last one, talking about oxygen. What does oxygen do? Oxygen enters the blood. So it moves from the lung to the blood, or we could say, yeah, so oxygen moves from the lungs to the blood, and carbon dioxide moves from the blood to the lungs. Okay, so at this stage, that would be a pretty perfect description of what goes on. Now, it is a little bit more complicated than that, of course, but for our level, that's very, very good description of what happens when we breathe in. And you only needed 3 of these. Now, hopefully you got 3 by 3. Hopefully you managed to get 3 of those points correct by yourself. So saying something very similar to these. So we're going to just take a quick look at the marking scheme. Here we go. We see the 9 marks are made of 3 by 3 here. You just need any 3. And okay, there's a little point to note. Okay, let's look at this here. So diaphragm contracts or diaphragm lowers. The rib cage rises. The pressure decreases inside the lungs. Lungs expand or get bigger. Air is taken in, or air enters the body through the nose and the mouth. Something like that would be similar, and we'll get you the point as well. Air travels through the trachea to the lungs. It moves. You don't have to say the word travel. You just say air moves. The trachea, air flows through the trachea. That's not important, but you should definitely be talking about the trachea because we've already named it in the diagram above. So use those labels again in your answer, guys. That's important. Use the information on the page. And then talking about gas exchange down here, where oxygen enters the blood and carbon dioxide enters the lungs. Okay, so just any 3 of those, guys. Hopefully you managed to get 15 marks on that. And the first bit was very, very common sense. You should be very confident about questions like that. Second bit is a little bit more challenging, but I still think most of us would have picked up the 9 marks there. And if not, then hopefully if you see something like this again, you will. All right, guys, that's it. We'll see you in the next one.